Kingsbury Street went quiet for just a second when Rex froze. The decorated police dog didn't care about the Mafia boss's guards, or the crowd, or the narcotics drop. His handler was here to stop. All he cared about was the boy in the wheelchair, and the silent, repeated taps no one but Rex could recognize as a cry for help. The morning hummed like any other. Commuters jostling with coffee cups, delivery trucks backfiring, the faint sweet stench of donuts leaking from a shop on the corner. Then the convoy hit. 3 black SUVs, windows tinted so dark you could mistake them for voids, rumbled into the intersection and slammed on their brakes, halting traffic, halting conversation, halting the air itself, like the street had been told to hold its breath. Robert Burgess stepped out of the middle SUV. You could feel his arrogance before you saw his face. The way his tailored navy suit didn't crease, the way his guards fanned out like human shadows, the way every bystander's eyes darted down to their shoes before darting away. This was the kind of man who didn't walk through a street. He owned it. He cut through the hush, and his expensive leather shoe scraped just past the front wheel of a scuffed wheelchair. Michael Parker's chair didn't jolt. Michael didn't flinch. At 12 years old, confined to that chair, mute since birth, he just tilted his chin up, steady, unblinking, and looked Burgess in the eye. "Watch where you're rolling, kid. Some of us actually walk to work." The insult hung thick, sharp enough to make a nearby barista pause mid-pour. Have you ever seen a person hold that kind of calm? Staring down a man who makes judges look the other way, and not letting a flicker of fear show. Michael didn't open his mouth. He just lifted his hand, slow enough that no guard would notice, and tapped the metal frame of his chair. 5 quick taps. Pause. 5 quick taps again. A code. A secret. A plea no one but one pair of dog eyes would catch. Across the street, pressed into the shadow of a bodega, Officer Daniel Reeves's knuckles whitened on Rex's leash. They'd staked out this corner for 3 hours, waiting for the package Burgess was supposed to pass off. Narcotics, cash, something that would finally stick to the boss. But Reeves's focus wasn't on the briefcases the guards clutched. It was on Rex. The German shepherd's ears had snapped up like antennae. His body went rigid, still as the brick wall behind them. This wasn't the twitch of a dog chasing a sparrow. This was the stillness Reeves had only seen when Rex sniffed out a hidden handgun in a grocery bag 2 winters back. "What is it, boy?" Reeves whispered, his throat tight. He followed the dog's unwavering gaze and landed on Michael, on the quiet tapping no one else heard. Rex didn't shift. He didn't whine. He just let out a low, rumbling growl. A warning, not a threat. Do you think you would have noticed that signal? The flick of a boy's hand, the hush in a dog's stance? Most people walked right past. Most people would never know how close this street came to changing. Right then. Burgess sneered one last time, gave a dismissive wave like he was swatting a fly, and turned to climb back into his SUV. The door clicked shut. The engines rumbled to life. The street exhaled, slowly, shakily, like it had been holding its breath this whole time. Burgess had no idea. No idea that the scared kid he'd mocked was the only person who could take his empire down. No idea that the dog staring holes through his window would be the one to drag him into the light. No idea that the quiet tap of a metal wheelchair was the sound of his luck running out. If you're still here, ask yourself this. Are you going to let this boy's courage go unseen? This kid can't yell, can't shout, can only tap a secret code and hope someone, or something, is listening. Will you hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the moment this silent boy takes down a mafia boss? So you don't leave him to face this alone? This story doesn't end here, and this kid deserves to have people show up for him. Hit subscribe. Hit like. Let's make sure everyone sees what happens when a quiet heart decides to fight back. The SUVs rounded the corner, and the hum of Kingsbury Street seeped back in. But Michael Parker's hand stayed resting on the metal frame of his wheelchair, his fingers still tingling from the taps he'd sent. Across the street, Rex's gaze didn't leave him. The dog's tail gave one final quiet thump before Officer Reeves gently urged him back into the bodega's shadow. The license plate on the lead SUV, scratched along the bottom edge, a chip of white paint peeling off, had burned into Michael's vision. It was the same plate he'd scribbled into the back of his sketchbook 2 weeks prior, with a broken pencil and a steady hand. 2 weeks earlier, the neon of Manny's corner store bleached the dark evening blue. Michael had been parked by the dumpster, out of the way, as always, waiting for his grandmother to buy milk, when the black van pulled up. 3 men in dark jackets dragged a man, tie askew, a half-hidden badge glinting on his belt, out of the store and into the back. The man didn't scream. He locked eyes with Michael for a split second and mouthed, "Run." Michael didn't run. He grabbed his sketchbook, the one his dad had given him, its cover taped with faded Band-Aids, and scribbled, the van's plate, the curve of the driver's ear, the deep scratch on the van's side panel. By the time the doors slammed shut, he had 3 pages of smudged, urgent lines. The memory wrapped around him like the old wool blanket his father kept on their porch. 5 taps, his dad had said, kneeling down so his face was level with Michael's wheelchair. Fast, steady. 5 taps means danger. Dogs like Rex? They don't need words. They need care. Practice that, and they'll listen, even when the world won't. That was a month before the accident. The one that took his dad. The one that left Michael without a voice. The one that put him in this chair. After that, Michael would roll to neighborhood patrol stops, tap 5 times on the curb, and watch the canines tilt their heads. Rex was the first who'd thumped his tail in reply. Back on Kingsbury Street, the guard at Burgess's SUV slung a briefcase over his shoulder, scratched on the corner, a faint coffee stain Michael recognized from that night, and Michael's breath caught, quiet, unheard. That was the case. The one the man had clutched, the one the men stuffed into the van. It held the files. The proof. This was his chance, to finish what his dad had started, to make the man who'd mouthed "run" not be forgotten. He lifted his hand again, slow and deliberate, and tapped the frame once, twice, pause, 3 times. A signal to Rex, quiet as a whisper. I see it. Do you see it, too? The quiet power of a boy who can't speak, but won't be silent? If you're ready to watch him turn a sketchbook and a tap code into justice, hit subscribe. Don't let this story end without you there to witness it. The hum of Kingsbury Street didn't fool Rex. The dog's shoulders stayed hunched, his nose twitching at every flicker of Burgess's entourage through the crowd, as Officer Reeves guided him through the press of commuters, ducking behind a hot dog cart, lingering by a bus stop, moving like 2 shadows stitched to the Mafia boss's heels. They'd traded the bodega shadow for a loose tail. Reeves's radio crackled quiet updates, but his eyes never left the briefcase slung over the guard's shoulder. That's the one, he thought. If we can trace that, we trace everything. Michael saw it too. He'd rolled into the crowd behind a cluster of elderly shoppers, their wool coats and grocery bags wrapping him in a quiet camouflage. Easy to overlook, easy to dismiss as just a kid along for the ride. His sketchbook lay open on his lap, rest, the pencil worn down to a nub. He scribbled fast, smudges marking the edge of the page. The guard's chipped front tooth, the lawyer's scuffed loafers, the flick of a slim USB drive slipping into the briefcase's inner pocket. That was the ledger, Burgess's Book of Blood, as his dad used to call these files. Names of bribed cops, bank accounts thick with laundered cash, the dates of hits no one had ever solved. The group paused outside a brick office building. The lawyer leaned in, his voice too low for even Reeves to catch, and tapped the briefcase once. A signal. Burgess's eyes darted over the crowd and locked on Michael. The Mafia boss peeled away from his men, striding over until he loomed over the wheelchair, his cologne sharp enough to make Michael's nose prickle. "You're still following me, huh? Want me to buy you new wheels? Something less scratched?" The sneer was colder than the first. This time, Burgess knew Michael was watching. Michael's head dropped like he was shrinking back, but his fingers found the metal frame of his chair. Slow, unhurried, impossible for anyone but a watching dog to track. 5 quick taps. Rex's head snapped around before the taps even finished. His leash went taut in Reeves's hand, the dog pulling hard, urgent, insistent, toward Michael. "Easy, boy," Reeves hissed, but he followed. He'd learned long ago to trust the dog's instinct over his own doubt. Across the sidewalk, the courier, an older man in a street cleaner's vest, hurried forward, the briefcase now in his grip. He was late, his jacket unzipped, his eyes darting at the sound of a distant siren. He didn't look at Michael. He didn't notice the sketchbook peeking from the wheelchair's lap. He just knelt, dropped the briefcase on the concrete beside Michael's wheels, and muttered a quick, "Panicked for the boss?" before melting into the crowd. The briefcase sat there, scratched corner, coffee stain, and a ledger of ruin tucked inside, right at Michael's feet. Rex was pulling harder now, Reeves's boots scuffing the pavement as he stumbled toward the boy. Burgess turned back to his men, already barking orders to move. "Do you feel that? The quiet crackle of a trap closing? That briefcase isn't just paper and metal. It's the end of Burgess, if Michael can hold on to it. Are you going to be here to watch it happen? Hit subscribe. Don't look away now. This is the moment a boy who can't speak takes hold of the truth." The leash burned against Reeves's palm as Rex pulled harder, not just toward the boy, but toward the scuffed briefcase tucked beside his wheelchair. For a beat, Reeves thought it was the scent of something hidden in the leather. Drugs, gunpowder, the sharp tang of fear. But then he saw it. The flick of Michael's fingers, quick as a sparrow's wing, against the metal frame. He'd sat through a dozen canine seminars back at the academy, listening to instructors talk about quiet codes, the ones for witnesses who couldn't speak, for kids who needed to call for help without being heard. 3 short taps, 2 long, the signal his old trainer had called "help now," a plea for aid, and a warning that danger was already at the door. Michael's head was bowed, like he was fumbling with a frayed glove on his left hand, but his right stayed anchored to the wheelchair's frame. Tap, tap, tap. Short, sharp. Pause. Tap, tap. Long, steady. The code hung in the air, silent to everyone but Rex. The dog's growl deepened. No longer a warning, but a demand. His paws dug into the asphalt, and Reeves had to plant his own feet to keep from being dragged forward. He fumbled for his radio. pressing the talk button so softly it barely clicked. Back up en route. Kingsbury and 5th. Suspect signal. K9 code. The hum of the street faded for Michael, replaced by the rough sound of his dad's voice. He could see him again, kneeling in their backyard, sunlight sifting through the oak tree, tapping the wheelchair's frame the same slow rhythm. 3 short, 2 long, his dad had said, his calloused hand covering Michael's. One day this might save your life, and when it does, you don't look away. Michael's fingers tightened on the frame. He hadn't looked away. Not that night at the store, not now. Across the sidewalk, Burgess's men had stopped their muttering. The guard with the chipped tooth was scanning the crowd, his hand drifting toward the gun at his hip. Burgess himself was turned, barking into a cell phone. But his shoulder was tensed, like he could smell the wrongness in the air, even if he couldn't name it. Michael lifted his head, his eyes locked with Rex's, brown, steady, unafraid. It was a plea without words. Now. Rex didn't hesitate. He pulled free of Reeves's grip, not hard, not violent, but fast, like a dog who knows the moment to move can't wait. Reeves stumbled, shouting after him, "Rex, hold!" But the dog was already darting through the gap between 2 shoppers, his ears flat, his gaze fixed only on Michael and the briefcase beside him. The crowd parted. Burgess's men turned, and Reeves watched, his heart in his throat, as the dog that had never broken a command in 3 years ran toward the boy who couldn't speak, and the code that would tear a Mafia empire apart. If you've stayed this long, you know this isn't just a chase. This is a son honoring his dad. This is a dog keeping a promise. Will you be here to watch it land? Hit subscribe. Don't miss the moment the quietest signal becomes the loudest truth. Rex hit the sidewalk running, and the crowd parted like water, until he slammed into the plastic coffee bag slung from a guard's wrist. The cup burst open, dark liquid spilling across the pavement, and the guard yelped, fumbling to catch the bag as his phone clattered to the ground. Chaos snaked through the bystanders, people stepping back, gasps, a toddler's cry. It was the distraction Reeves needed. He surged forward, badge flashing in the morning light, and shouted over the noise, "Police, stand where you are!" Burgess spun around, his face shifting from annoyance to cold, practiced innocence. His men froze, hands hovering near their jackets, but not daring to reach further. Burgess let out a barking laugh, stepping between Reeves and the wheelchair. "You really think this cripple kid is part of your little investigation, officer? This is a street fight over a spilled coffee. Calm down before you make a fool of yourself." His smirk was sharp, but his eyes darted to the briefcase tucked beside Michael's wheels, quick as a guilty rat. Rex didn't wait. He'd reached the wheelchair now, his nose locked on the leather case. Before anyone could shout, he lunged, gentle, for a dog his size, but unyielding, his teeth catching the flap and tearing it open. A cascade of plastic USB drives spilled onto the asphalt, each marked with scrawled aliases. Lion. Hound. Judge. Reeves's breath caught. Those were the names from the cold case files, names tied to 3 unsolved hits, to bribes that had vanished from city records. The crowd gasped loud enough to drown out the traffic. Phones snapped up, lenses glinting, strangers becoming witnesses, their videos already stitching together the collapse of the man who'd ruled the street. Burgess's face drained of color. The smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl. "You can't prove anything belongs to me. Those are just some kid's trinkets, some cop's overreach." He didn't finish. Michael had lifted his hand from the wheelchair frame. His finger was extended, steady as a compass needle, pointing directly at the gold ring on Burgess's left hand. A lion's head, its eyes etched sharp. The same emblem Michael had scribbled into the margins of his sketchbook. The same mark on the jacket of the man who'd dragged the undercover agent into the van 2 weeks prior. Reeves followed the boy's gaze. His radio, tucked at his shoulder, crackled to life, loud, urgent, unmistakable. "Reeves, this is dispatch. We've got confirmation. The serial numbers on those drives? They match the FBI's missing case ledger. Every last one." Burgess stared at Michael, at the pointing finger, at the dog sitting alert beside the spilled drives. For the first time, the man who'd never been afraid looked small. "Did you see that? A boy who can't speak, a dog who wouldn't quit. They just handed the police the keys to take down a kingpin. Will you be here when it all ends? Hit subscribe. Don't miss the verdict that finally makes this street quiet again." The sound of the coffee cup hitting the pavement and the sight of Rex tearing open the briefcase was the first crack. The confirmation on Reeves's radio, the serial numbers on those drives, they match the FBI's missing case ledger. Every last one was the sound of the foundation buckling. Panic didn't spread. It ignited. Burgess's guards, the human shadows, finally shed their stillness. 3 hands shot to the inside of tailored jackets, but before the chrome of a single weapon could gleam, the air was ripped open by the shriek of approaching sirens, not one, but a symphony, closing fast from Kingsbury and 5th. Officer Reeves didn't hesitate. He surged forward, pushing Michael's wheelchair back and spinning to shield him, his own service weapon now drawn and aimed at the chest of the guard with the chipped tooth. Rex, his ears flat and his body a low, vibrating wire of menace, dropped into a crouch between the officer and the boy, the growl in his chest deepening to a steady, earth-shaking rumble. "Drop them, now!" Reeves's voice was raw, cutting through the rising tide of gasps and camera clicks. Burgess, his arrogance shattered, looked like a cornered animal. His face, moments ago composed, was a mask of pure, reptilian rage. He saw the ring of cameras, the flashing badge, the unyielding dog, and finally, the quiet boy. In a move as fast and foul as his whole operation, Burgess didn't draw a gun. He lunged, slamming his hand onto the handles of Michael Parker's wheelchair. He hauled the chair back, yanking Michael up against his chest, using the 12-year-old as a shield. The scuffed metal frame bit into the Mafia boss's jacket. "Move, or the kid gets it," Burgess spat, his voice booming over the sirens now wailing on the corner. He pressed one hand hard against the back of Michael's small neck, the other digging into the chair's handle. The street froze once more, witnesses holding their phones and their breaths, waiting for the shot. Reeves flinched, his aim dropping a fraction. A human shield, the oldest trick. But Michael Parker didn't flinch. He stared up into the face of the man who had mocked him, who was now using him. He was steady, unblinking, fueled by the memory of his father's words and the glint of a half-hidden badge. Slowly, deliberately, Michael raised his hand, the left one, the one closest to Burgess, and tapped the metal armrest. The sound was microscopic, lost beneath the sirens and the yelling. But it wasn't for the crowd. Tap, tap, 2 short taps. A code arranged long ago, meant for a dog who didn't need words. Attack low, disarm fast. Rex didn't wait for a second command. He didn't bark, didn't growl. In a single, blur-fast motion, the German Shepherd drove low and hard. He didn't bite. He hit the asphalt and used the momentum to drive his massive shoulder and chest into Burgess's legs. The mob boss bellowed, the force of the impact tearing his grip from the wheelchair. The suit, the arrogance, the power, it all vanished as his feet flew out from under him. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, his head ringing against the hard concrete. Reeves was on him in a heartbeat, dropping his weapon and leaping forward. He slammed Burgess's arm behind his back. The metal of the handcuffs clicked shut, loud and final, on a wrist that had never known restraint. The street erupted. A unified roar of disbelief, triumph, and sheer chaotic joy. As police officers swarmed the corner, cuffing the guards, securing the evidence, they hauled Robert Burgess to his feet. His suit was dusty, his lip bloody, his empire reduced to a handful of digital files and a ruined reputation, all caught live on hundreds of cell phones. He glared over the heads of the officers dragging him away, his eyes locking onto Michael. "You'll regret this, you little freak," he screamed, the voice of the kingpin reduced to a pathetic, impotent snarl. Michael didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He simply let his right hand fall back onto the armrest of his wheelchair and tapped once more. Tap. Justice. The precinct's fluorescent lights glinted off the edges of Michael Parker's sketchbook. The pages crinkled where Reeves's fingers had flipped through them a dozen times that day. Each smudged line, each hurried scribble, was a piece the department had been missing for years. The chip in the abductor's front tooth matched security footage from a 2022 warehouse hit. The lion's head emblem on Burgess's ring was scrawled in the margin of a page labeled "Van Driver, Third Saint Disappearance." Even the scratch on the side of the black SUV from Kingsbury Street lined up with a vehicle spotted outside a judge's home last spring. "These aren't just drawings," Reeves said, leaning down so his voice was quiet enough only Michael could hear, even if Michael couldn't reply. "These are the map we've been looking for." Outside the precinct doors, the street hummed with a different kind of noise. Reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones were held high, and the phrase "silent witness" echoed across the sidewalk. When Michael rolled out an hour later, Rex trotting beside his wheelchair, Reeves at his shoulder, the crowd surged forward, questions shouting over one another. Michael didn't flinch. He just held up his sketchbook, open to the page of Burgess's ring, and let the cameras catch the inked lines. His silence wasn't a weakness. It was the loudest proof the city had ever seen. By sunset, Burgess's empire was dust. The mayor announced 3 city council members under arrest for bribery. 5 bank accounts, stuffed with laundered cash, were frozen. The docks, Burgess's main smuggling hub, were swarmed by federal agents. But as Reeves sorted through the final USB drive that night, a name jumped out at him, unredacted, unaccounted for. Vincent Moretti. Burgess's silent partner, the files said, the man who'd pulled the strings when Burgess wanted the spotlight, the man no one had ever photographed. The next morning, as Reeves walked Michael to his grandmother's front porch, he knelt down, his hand resting on Rex's collar. "We're not done yet," he said. "Moretti's still out there, but you're safe. We'll keep you safe." Michael's fingers brushed the edge of his sketchbook, tucked in his wheelchair's pouch. He tapped the metal frame once, twice, pause. Once, the code his dad had taught him for, "I trust you." Rex thumped his tail against the porch step. As they turned to drive away, Reeves glanced in the rearview mirror. Down the block, a black sedan sat parked at the corner. Its windows were tinted black. No one moved inside. But Reeves's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The Mafia wasn't done, but neither was the boy with the sketchbook. If you followed this far, you know this story isn't over. There's a shadow still waiting in the quiet. Will you be here to watch Michael and Rex finish what they started? Hit subscribe. Don't let this quiet hero fight alone. The black sedan on the corner was gone by noon, but the chill it left behind lingered in the precinct. Officer Reeves stared at the final piece of evidence, the name Vincent Moretti. He was the ghost, the shadow partner who'd remained untouched while Burgess and his thugs filled the city's jails. Reeves knew Moretti wouldn't surface for drugs or cash. He'd come for the USB drives Michael had snagged. He'd come to tie up the last loose end, the boy himself. A map in the margins. It was an FBI analyst poring over the copies of Michael's sketchbook. Who noticed it? The lion's head drawing, she said, tapping the page Michael had used to nail Burgess. Look closer at the cross-hatching, the density of the lines. It's not shading, it's a pattern. Reeves, Michael, and Rex gathered around the desk. They realized the marginalia, the apparently random scribbles Michael made while observing the streets, were actually sophisticated ciphers. The frequency of dots, the thickness of lines, the placement of smudges, all corresponded to coordinates. With Rex's intense focus fixed on Michael's slightest movements, the code was cracked. A large shipment, Moretti's last attempt to salvage his operations, was scheduled for midnight at the old Blackwood dockyard. "This is it," Reeves said, a new energy buzzing through him. "We set the trap. We use the USB drives as bait." Michael, strapped into his chair, looked up at Reeves. He lifted his hand and tapped the metal frame, slow and insistent. 3 short, 2 long. Help now. He wasn't asking for safety. He was insisting on participation. He was the only one who could truly read the shadows. Reeves hesitated for only a second. He had learned to trust the boy who couldn't speak more than he trusted any informant. "Fine," he sighed, adjusting the bulletproof vest. "You come, but you stay in the mobile unit. Out of sight." Ambush at the docks. The air at the Blackwood dockyard was thick with salt and decay. Moonlight sliced through the gaps in the corrugated metal warehouses, illuminating the skeletal frames of rusted cranes. Reeves, Rex, and a dozen FBI tactical agents were positioned around a stack of empty crates. The briefcase containing the drives placed conspicuously beneath a flickering lamp. The silence was the deepest kind of threat. Rex's head snapped up. His ears swiveled, no sound audible to the human team. A low, continuous growl, like grinding gears, rumbled in his chest. Movement. "They're not using the main entrance," Reeves whispered into his comms. "Rex senses. Get down." A split second later, the night exploded. Gunfire erupted from the shadows of an unseen container ship. Moretti hadn't come to collect a shipment. He'd come to ambush the team and eliminate the evidence. Reeves shoved Michael's wheelchair behind a colossal, overturned coil of steel cable, throwing himself down beside it as bullets whined off the metal. The dockyard became a deafening maze of muzzle flashes and shouting. Clutching his notebook to his chest, Michael scanned the chaos. He didn't panic. His gaze, steady and sharp, cut through the gunfire until he spotted him, a tall, lean figure darting between crates. Moretti. He wasn't involved in the fight. He was using the distraction to escape through a side gate, the last living thread of the Mafia empire. Michael slammed his knuckles against the nearest metal pipe. A loud thwang that was swallowed by the fighting, but that Rex, locked onto the boy's will, registered. He tapped 5 quick times, then a sharp, distinct stomp on the footrest. The urgent pursue signal. Rex needed no further command. Ignoring the spray of bullets, the German Shepherd launched himself over the coil of cable, disappearing into the dark toward the fleeing figure. The final key. Reeves saw Rex charge and followed instantly. "Moretti's running. Northwest gate." The pursuit was short. Rex, running like a missile, rounded the corner of a derelict shed just as Moretti reached the gate. Rex didn't engage in a standoff. He simply hit the man low, a perfect tackle that drove the wind from Moretti's lungs. Reeves arrived to find Moretti pinned by the massive dog, his face contorted in terror. With practiced precision, Reeves cuffed the final boss. But as he pulled the man up, a small silver object slipped from Moretti's inner jacket pocket. It was a micro SD card. Later, back at the precinct, the analysts confirmed what they'd found: a hidden, encrypted section of the digital ledger, containing the final key. It wasn't just cash and bribery. It was the chilling, irrefutable evidence linking both Burgess and Moretti directly to 20 unsolved murders over the last decade. Michael, watching the evidence display on the screen, finally lowered his gaze. He didn't need to say a word. The job was done. The kingpin and the puppet master, both gone, taken down by the quietest voice in the city. If you've walked this far with Michael and Rex, you've seen a boy turn silence into strength, a dog turn instinct into justice. This isn't just a story of taking down a mafia. It's a story of a son honoring his dad, of a partner keeping a promise. Will you stay for the final chapter? The one where the quiet hero finally gets the peace he's earned? Hit subscribe. Don't let this boy's courage end without you there to see it. The courtroom's wooden benches smelled of old polish and quiet tension, months removed from the gunfire at Blackwood Dockyard. The hum of the gallery died. The second officer Reeves stepped to the stand, his voice steady as he laid out the chain. The taps on a wheelchair frame, a dog's instinct, a sketchbook full of lines that had outsmarted a mafia. Burgess sat slouched at the defense table, his suit wrinkled, the lion ring that had damned him now locked in an evidence bag. Moretti stared at the floor, his shadow shrinking against the wall. When Reeves finished his testimony, he didn't point to a USB drive or a witness stand. He turned and gestured to the back row, where Michael Parker sat, his sketchbook resting on his lap. Rest. Rex's head tucked beside the wheelchair's wheel. The judge had made an exception, just this once. The room's eyes followed. Michael wheeled forward slowly, the only sound the soft creak of his chair's bearings. He lifted the sketchbook and opened it to the first page, the smudged outline of a black SUV, the license plate scrawled in the margin. Then the next, the lion's head ring, inked with the same cross-hatching that had hidden the dock coordinates. Page after page, each line a memory, each smudge a piece of the truth no voice could have spoken as loud. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The jury leaned forward. The bailiff's breath caught, and even the defense lawyer's objections died in his throat. These weren't just drawings. They were the quiet, unshakable testimony of a boy who had watched when the world looked away, who had listened when no one else could hear. When the verdict came, it was quiet, then deafening in its finality. Guilty. On all counts. Burgess's shoulders slumped. Moretti didn't move. The gallery let out a breath they'd been holding for months, soft, relieved, uncelebratory. This wasn't a victory cry. It was a sigh of justice. Outside the courthouse, the spring sun warmed the concrete. Reeves knelt down, his fingers holding a small, polished, honorary police badge. Its edges smooth, no rank, just the city's seal. He pinned it to the collar of Michael's gray hoodie. "You did it, kid. Your dad would be proud." Michael's fingers brushed the badge. He looked up at Reeves, then at Rex, who sat beside the wheelchair, his tail thumping once against the pavement. Then the dog barked, short, clear, a sound that hung in the air like a promise, an echo of the growl that had started it all on Kingsbury Street. Michael smiled. It was small, but bright, brighter than any spotlight. He tapped the wheelchair's frame once, soft and steady, a thank you. The boy who couldn't speak taught the city how to listen. If you've stayed to see this quiet victory, you've watched a son honor his father, a dog keep a promise, and a silence become louder than any shout. This is the kind of courage that doesn't make headlines. It makes change. Hit subscribe to hold on to this story and to find more of the quiet heroes who make the world better, one small, steady choice at a time.